Hey, this might seem like a silly thought, but have you ever contemplated the fact that God has hands? That just strikes me, and I thought it would be worth spending a few minutes to talk about today. I'm Pastor Cary, and this is Growing in the Gospel, and I need to be brief today. And so I thought, Psalm 95, verses 4 and forward. So we covered basically verses 1, 2, and 3 yesterday, and we're going to look at verses 4, 5, and 6 for the next few minutes. And it really talks about God's hands. And when you think about this, when you begin to extrapolate what that implies, and when you look at other passages of Scripture, it's really quite amazing and quite wonderful and beautiful to think about. So thank you for joining me. Let's spend a few minutes meditating on Psalm 95. We're picking up today in verse 4. This is a short psalm, 6 verses, 2 days. And we talked yesterday about singing, God giving us a reason to sing, and that if you're not a good singer, you can make a joyful noise, and he is the rock of our salvation. We talked about coming into his presence with thanksgiving and making a joyful noise with psalms, and the Lord being a great God and a great King above all gods. He is triumphant, victorious. He is ultimate and supreme. So verse 4, in his hand are the deep places of the earth. The strength of the hills is his also. The sea is his, and he made it, and his hands formed the dry land. Oh, come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord, our Maker. So back to verse 4. In his hand are the deep places of the earth. Let me talk to you for a minute about the topography of Israel. There are very deep places, and there are very high places. And sometimes they are right next to each other. Some of the deepest places on the entire earth are at the Dead Sea and in the Jordan River Valley, which is below sea level. And then some of the highest places, Mount Hermon at the north part of the country, the hills that run the spine of the country from north to south, the hill country where Jerusalem is. These are high hills. On the eastern slope, it's all desert and barren, dry places. On the western slope, coming out of those hills, is lowlands and rolling hills and green, lush, flourishing places, very, very fertile land coming to the Mediterranean Sea. And so what you're seeing here is a description really of the nation of Israel and their experience of the topography. Remember, they walked everywhere. And it's a very different experience to walk a place rather than riding in a car or even riding a bike. When you are walking, you are smelling and feeling, and you are immersed into the experience. One of my favorite things to do with my wife or my daughter is to walk in different places. And over the years, when we moved to Connecticut, we would go down to the city. We'd jump on a train and get into New York City. And my daughter and I, we would just walk. We'd walk miles and miles of New York City. There's nothing quite the same as breathing, hearing the sounds, the horns, the city sounds, seeing the architecture, feeling and immersing into the experience. The smells, they're not always good, and sometimes they are. The food is amazing, right? But feeling and immersing. And these people were living in this geography. They were immersed in the geography. They walked everywhere they went. So they were climbing these high places. They were walking these dry places. They were going to these watery places, the Jordan River and the sea, Mediterranean Sea. And they were journeying through these low places. And so they would use these metaphors, like, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. That's a metaphor of the low places in our lives, but it's also a very geographical reality when you get to Israel and look at the rift that goes out of Jerusalem down towards the Jordan River Valley. It is literally a winding canyon crevasse, and it's just deep and arduous, that climb up to Jerusalem. And it would have been the way the people took on their pilgrimage to these feasts that we were talking about yesterday. And so they're experiencing the land that they're talking about, and they're remembering that God has hands, and he formed the deep places, and he formed the hills, and he is more powerful than the deep hills, than the deep places in the hills, and he holds it all in his hands, and he owns the sea, and he made it all, and he formed it all. So the picture here is that this is all the work of God's hands, and this is all in God's hands. And the metaphor comes forward into life, not just geography, but life. And so the singers, the writer, the singers, the celebrations of the psalm would have been, God's brought us through another year. We come now to the Feast of Tabernacles, or the Feast of Trumpets, and we're singing and we're celebrating, and we're thanking God for bringing us through another year. He brought rain, he brought flocks, he brought herds, he multiplied our crops, he paid our bills, he provided for us, he fed us. He led us forward through another year, and he had us in his hands through the deep places. And he had the deep places in his hands, and he formed the deep places. He's sovereign and he's providential. And the hills, he made the hills, and he led us over the hills, and the high places, the celebrations, the low places, the hardship. It's all his. God has us in his hands. And you know what I immediately go to in my mind and heart in terms of contemplating this and celebrating this is Isaiah 49:16, when he says, "Behold, I have graven thee upon the palms of my hands." You are literally written in God's hand if you know Jesus. That is a staggering thought. All of your journey is in the hand of God. All of your journey has been crafted by the hand of God. You are walking forward in the hand of God, and you are cared for, you are secured, you are engraved as his, in his hand. And I love Ephesians 5, where it says, "Be ye therefore followers of God as dear children." Because little children, almost instinctively, when they're in a public place or a walking place with their parents, they almost instinctively reach out and hold the hand. In fact, all of my kids did this growing up, and they did it well into their elementary years. The boys are the ones that left off of it sooner. But I remember a time when one of my sons was even, I want to say 5th or 6th grade, and we were walking, and he just reached out and held my hand. And I thought, he's about to outgrow this, but I was glad in the moment that he hadn't. I remember my daughter Haley doing this all through her childhood, all through her teen years. And I remember even late in her high school years going places, and she would just instinctively reach out and hold my hand. And I thought, well, this is going to go away when she's an adult and she gets married. And those are precious things. The idea that I can reach out and do that with God, that I can be a little child, I can hold his hand, and I can celebrate that he has hands, and that his hands can be upon me. He can touch me. He can lead me. He can guide me. I can hold his hand. He holds me in his hand. I'm engraved in his hand. And all of my life, from the low places to the high places, are held in his hand. And so the psalm ends with this declaration, this invitation and declaration, and just a decision to explode in celebration. Oh, come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord, our Maker. My friend, you have a Maker. He is good. He loves you. He has hands. And those hands reach out to you with blessing and favor and love and goodness. And he is gentle. So trust his hands and hold his hands and celebrate the fact that you are engraved in his hands. And if you have never trusted Jesus, do it. Best thing ever, best decision you'll ever make, and your name will be engraved in the hands of God. That is Growing in the Gospel for today. Maybe someone you love would be blessed by this. Share it with them. Drop a comment or a question. I'd love to hear from you. I hope you've had a good week, and I look forward to seeing you either on the weekend or on Monday. So have a great day. I'm praying for you, my friends.